We're going to take a look at problem number 7 from the 4B or 4 beta assignment. We're asked to find the maximums and minimums of this particular function. And so the first thing that we always do in this case is we take the derivative. The derivative of this particular function is going to be a chain rule where the outer function is something squared. So we get 2 times something. That something is sine of theta. But then we also need to remember to multiply by the derivative of the inner function, which is cosine of theta, which brings us to this derivative. The next thing we want to do is identify the critical points. And the critical points in this case, since sine and cosine are never going to be undefined, is going to be those values for which the sine of the angle is 0, or the values for which the cosine of the angle is 0. And this is really a matter where we want to think about the unit circle. So let's start with the sine of the angle. The sine of the angle would be 0 here at 0, and then again here at pi. And then the cosine of the angle would be 0 here at pi over 2, and then again here at 3 pi over 2. Step 3 is to build a sine chart. Now keep in mind that this particular problem said to work on the interval that starts at 0 and ends at 2 pi. So I'm only going to be looking at angles that are between 0 and 2 pi. And our critical points were at pi over 2, pi, and 3 pi over 2. Now keep in mind that when we divide it up this way, it ends up that this first region corresponds to quadrant number 1 in the unit circle. The second region, from pi over 2 to pi, corresponds to the second quadrant, and so on. If you look at our derivative, which is what we want to assess the sine of, you can figure out pretty quickly whether it's going to be positive or negative by looking at the unit circle. So sine and cosine are both positive here in the first quadrant, so when you multiply them, you're going to get a positive. In the second quadrant, cosine is negative and sine is positive. So here when we multiply them together, we're going to get a negative. In quadrant 3, both the sine and the cosine are negative, so that when we multiply them, we're going to get a positive. And then in quadrant number 4, the cosine is positive, but the sine is negative. So when we multiply them together, we're going to get a negative. So here's our sine chart. Finally, we're asked to assess where the maximums, the local maximums, and the local minimums of the function are. So we can see that since at pi over 2, we have a pattern that goes positive, 0, negative, that's going to be a maximum or a local maximum. And we have one more of those right here at 3 pi over 2. Okay. Meanwhile, we are going to have a local minimum at angle equals pi. And the reason for that is that at pi we have the derivative pattern negative or decreasing, 0, and then positive or increasing.